Hi, I want to say a few words on this controversy around the comedian Jimmy Carr, who told a particular joke that has attracted a lot of, controversy. Um, this is the sort of thing where there's a lot of talking points to be made and a lot of debate to be had. Um, Let me just say from the outset, I have never agreed with this notion that some people have that comedians seem to be the only people who have free speech. What I mean by that is the free speech argument is used for comedians often more than other professions. And I just don't agree with that. The thing about free speech, and this is extremely important, is that the right to have an opinion or the right to make an expression, including jokes, is there, but so is the right for others to criticize. The right to criticize, the right to voice dissatisfaction, distaste, displeasure, you name it. That is also part of free speech. So some people have this knee jerk reaction that when people criticize a controversial comic, they're attacking free speech. Unless they're saying someone should be forbidden from saying things, then it's not the same as an attack on free speech. There's something I think people get mixed up with. Criticizing someone else's stance or joke or opinion is not an attack on free speech in of itself. Um, and I'm saying that as a starting point before I go into a report about this. Okay, so this is from the Guardian, I believe. Yeah, the Guardian. Okay, so it's attracted a lot of controversy. People should consider boycotting the comedian Jimmy Carr because of his widely criticized comment about the Gypsy, Roma, and traveller communities in a Netflix special. The UK Health Secretary Sajid Javid has suggested. Carr has been condemned by groups including the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, the Auschwitz Memorial, and Hope Not Hate for comments he made in uh, the His Dark Material section of his show. Carr joked about the horror of 6 million Jewish lives being lost, before suggesting the deaths of thousands of gypsies at the hands of the Nazis had been one of the positives of the Holocaust. And that's verbatim, that's what the joke was. Asked about the comments, Javid told Times Radio they were horrid. He added, I think we all have a right to react to that. One of the best ways anyone can react to that is show these platforms what they think about Jimmy Carr by not watching and listening to him, and that will send him a very strong message. Well, I think that's a bit unrealistic because fans of Jimmy Carr are not going, that isn't going to really change anything because fans of Jimmy Carr will defend it. They'll say it was taken out of context or they'll continue watching the show. I find that fans of comedians, for the most part, tend to be pretty loyal, you know. So, with all due respect to Sajid Javid, I don't think that's really realistic. Also, it will lead to accusations of censorship. But again, it's not the same thing. He's just suggesting that people don't watch it, not the same as censorship. Um, I don't know Jimmy Carr very well. Certainly, if someone were to say like names of very controversial comics, he wouldn't get the top. I would have thought someone like Frankie Boyle or Roy Chubby Brown. I would expect that sort of joke for someone like that. Jimmy Carr, like I said, I don't know the guy that well, and I've nothing against him on a personal basis, but I think that was in very bad taste, and I think it was callous. Um, I mean, Romani people are a minority, and if they heard that, basically saying that their people are less important than other victims of the Holocaust, that it's all a big, tagline for a joke. It's vile. And let's look at the context. I'm just going to read out from Wikipedia here about the Romani Genocide. I mean, they were one of the most persecuted groups after the Jews. This is from Wikipedia. The Romani Genocide, or the Romani Holocaust, also known as the Parajmos, meaning destruction, um, or the Samuda Ripon, if I'm pronouncing that right, known as mass killing, was the effort by Nazi Germany and its World War II allies to commit ethnic cleansing and eventual genocide against Europe's Romani people and Sinti during the Holocaust era. Under Hitler, a supplementary decree to the Nuremberg Laws was issued on the 26th of November 1935, classifying the Romani as enemies of the race-based state, thereby placing them in the same category as the Jews. Thus, in some ways, the fate of the Roma in Europe paralleled that of the Jews in the Jewish Holocaust. Historians estimate that between 220,000 and 500,000 Romani and Sinti were killed by the Germans and their collaborators. 25 to 50% of the estimate of slightly fewer than 1 million Roma in Europe at the time. Later research cited by Ian Hancock estimated the death toll to be about 1.5 million out of an estimated 2 million Roma. So this was a clear attempt to exterminate an entire people. Um, and that those figures are sobering. Even if you take the smaller figure, 220,000, that's not a few thousand. That is a huge number of people. Um, I just think that some things should not be joked about. Some people might disagree with that. They might say, well, humor is the way to move forward. Now, the way I look at it is I think there is a place for dark humor. I think there is a place for edgy humor, or perhaps I should say edgy humor more than dark humor. Um, After all, humor, can sometimes be used as a weapon against bigotry or a weapon to, you know, humor is part of human survival. It's part of human tenacity, and there are situations where edgy humor can actually be an enabling thing. It can help people to reclaim identity and so on. I do believe that. I do believe that. I mean, as an example, after 9/11, New Yorkers told jokes about the attacks, which might seem a little bit in bad taste, but in their case, it was a coping mechanism. Um, on race-based jokes, I think it's funny if it's evenly applied. So, as an example, excuse me, I just got something went up my nose there. I don't know what that was. Um, Yeah, on Family Guy, for example, they tell racist jokes on that show, but the point is it's aimed at everyone. It's not targeted at one group. It mocks white Americans, it mocks Asian Americans, it mocks Italian Americans. It's evenly applied. Um, and that sort of thing is generic. It's not about a specific event. It's not about, whereas what Carr was doing was taking a historic event, something that really happened, and making a vulgar punchline out of it. And I just don't think any context can justify that. By the way, he hasn't denied making it, so this isn't a case that he was misquoted. He hasn't denied it. Apparently, there were trigger warnings on his show, so whether that was he himself instituted that or it was just something that had to go with his show. Personally, I'm just not a fan of stand-up comedy anyway. I mean, probably some are better than others, but I do believe nowadays, particularly, um, there's this notion that to be funny, you have to be shocking as possible. And I think there's probably is pressure on comedians to be as shocking as possible because they're all doing it. So, Jimmy Carr's probably thinking, well, how do I stand myself out? Well, I'll have this controversy. Hell, a cynical side might say this was all deliberate. He knew he'd get a backlash, but it has actually given him more attention. I mean, his name's been in the headlines for the past week. So a cynical observer might say it's actually deliberate, to get the controversy. In that sense, what Sajid Javid is proposing is kind of counterproductive because it might actually encourage people to go and see his shows. Um, but I basically take the view I wouldn't support censorship. I wouldn't support, for example, his shows being banned or something like that. I think that would be going too far. But I do think that people have a right to criticize. And his fans can't say, "Oh, just have a sense of humor," or "Don't watch it if you don't like it." That's not good enough because he's a public figure. You can't just take the view that if a public figure says something, then people can't have an opinion. That's ridiculous. Just because they're not fans or they weren't at his show. Um, it's a news story now, rightly or wrongly, it is. And I take the view that if someone is going to say something like that in a public arena, then um, they should expect a backlash. Uh, I appreciate not everyone watching this will agree. Some will say, in the end of the day, it's just a joke. It's not an action. But I don't know. I think it can contribute to dehumanizing people. If we're saying, if the whole point of the joke is that we should grieve for Jewish victims, but other victims are less important, there is certain sinister overtones to that. Um, I mean, you know, what if a Romani person is a victim of a hate crime? And I'm not saying that Jimmy Carr would be responsible, but people might think, oh well, they're just, it is a group that gets certain stereotypes against them, that they're involved in crime, that and so on. Whether that's true or not is another matter. But the point is, the Romani genocide was a real thing. It happened, and I just think certain things are not funny. I just think that there's a fine line between being edgy and just being tasteless and callous. And I do think, unfortunately, in the world of stand-up comedy, it's all about how shocking can you be, and that's very cynical. I think it's sad. Um, we should be intelligent enough as a society to find humor in edgy things without having to rely on the most shocking things possible. That's my take. I don't think he should be cancelled. I don't think he should be censored. But I do think critics are absolutely have a right to criticize him. And I just don't agree with this idea. Oh well, they don't have to watch the show, or they can't say anything if they haven't watched the show. As long as the joke wasn't, misquoted, and that was the wording, then yeah, the criticism is valid. That's part of free speech as well. And that's what those who defend controversial comics have to remember. They're talking about free speech. Well, there is free speech to criticize. I personally think it's in bad taste. And so I'm joining those who are criticizing him. I think it's pretty shameful to use the mass suffering, by the way, including a lot of children, as a punchline. Just days after Holocaust Memorial Day. I just think it's wrong. Period.